The rain had been falling for 3 days straight in Millbrook, Tennessee, turning the small town into a gray watercolor of mist and memory. Route 17 curved through the hills like a scar, and on that particular Thursday evening, the only sound breaking the silence was the distant rumble of a motorcycle engine cutting through the downpour. Marcus Cole had been riding for 6 hours. His leather jacket was soaked through, and the cold had long since stopped bothering him. At 52 years old, he had learned that discomfort was just another companion on the road, no different from the ghosts that sometimes rode beside him in the dark. He was heading home after a week-long charity ride with his brothers from the Iron Guardians Motorcycle Club. 47 riders had traveled across 4 states, raising money for veterans struggling to find their footing after returning from overseas. Marcus himself had served 2 tours in the Middle East, and he understood what it meant to come home to a world that had moved on without you. The gas station appeared through the rain like a faded photograph. Benson's Quick Stop, the sign read, though half the letters had burned out years ago. Marcus pulled in, killed the engine, and sat for a moment listening to the rain drum against his helmet. Through the foggy window of the convenience store, he could see a woman standing at the counter, her shoulders hunched in a way that spoke of exhaustion deeper than any single sleepless night could cause. He removed his helmet and walked inside. The bell above the door announced his arrival with a tired chime. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that particular shade of pale that made even healthy people look unwell. Behind the counter, an elderly man with thick glasses barely looked up from his newspaper. And there, near the coffee station, stood the woman he had seen through the window. She was young, maybe 30, with dark hair that hung in wet strands around a face that might have been beautiful if it were not so marked by worry. Her clothes were damp, suggesting she had been walking in the rain, and she held a paper cup of coffee between her hands as if it were the only source of warmth in the entire world. But it was not the woman who caught Marcus's attention. It was the little girl hiding behind her legs. The child could not have been more than 5 years old. She had the same dark hair as her mother, pulled back in 2 uneven pigtails that someone had clearly done in a hurry. Her eyes were large and watchful, the kind of eyes that had seen too much for someone so small. She clutched a stuffed rabbit that had been loved to the point of falling apart, its ears drooping and its button eyes hanging by threads. Marcus moved to the coffee station, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He had learned long ago that sudden movements frightened those who had reasons to be frightened. The woman glanced at him, then quickly looked away. Her hand moved instinctively to touch her daughter's head, a gesture of protection so automatic it seemed to require no thought at all. Marcus poured himself a cup of coffee. It was burnt and bitter, the kind of coffee that had been sitting on the warmer for hours, but he drank it anyway. He was about to turn toward the counter when he heard it, a small voice, barely above a whisper. "Mommy, is the bad man coming?" The woman knelt down quickly, her face close to her daughter's. "No, baby, no one is coming. We are safe now." But even as she spoke, her eyes darted toward the window, toward the empty parking lot where rain continued to fall in sheets. And Marcus recognized that look. He had seen it in the eyes of villagers in countries far from here, in the eyes of fellow soldiers waiting for an attack that might come at any moment. It was the look of someone who had stopped believing in safety. He paid for his coffee and walked outside. The rain had lessened slightly, reduced now to a persistent drizzle that seemed reluctant to stop entirely. He sat on his motorcycle, not yet ready to ride, and watched the front door of the convenience store. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The woman emerged, holding her daughter's hand. She looked left, then right, then started walking along the shoulder of the road. No car, no umbrella, just 2 figures moving through the rain toward whatever destination awaited them. Marcus made a decision. He started his engine and pulled up alongside them. The woman immediately stepped back, pushing her daughter behind her, and Marcus saw the fear flash across her face like lightning. He killed the engine and raised both hands. "I am not here to cause trouble," he said. His voice was calm, the same voice he used when approaching wounded animals or frightened children. "I just noticed you are walking in the rain. Is there somewhere I can take you? The woman shook her head. We are fine. You are soaking wet. Your daughter is shivering. As if to confirm his words, the little girl sneezed. It was a small sound, almost delicate, but it seemed to crack something in her mother's resolve. For a long moment, no one spoke. The rain fell. The road stretched empty in both directions. And Marcus waited, because waiting was something he had become very good at. There is a motel, the woman finally said. About 3 miles up the road. The Pine Ridge. I know it. Get on. She hesitated. I have a daughter, Marcus said. She is grown now, living in Oregon with 2 kids of her own. I know what it looks like when a mother is trying to protect her child, and I know what it looks like when she needs help. Something shifted in the woman's eyes. Not trust, not exactly, but perhaps the beginning of trust. The first small step toward believing that not everyone in the world meant her harm. She lifted her daughter onto the back of the motorcycle, then climbed on behind her, wrapping her arms around the child to keep her secure. Hold on, Marcus said. They rode through the rain. The Pine Ridge Motel was exactly the kind of place that existed in towns like Millbrook. 2 stories of faded yellow paint, a parking lot with more potholes than pavement, and a neon sign that promised vacancies in letters that flickered uncertainly. Marcus pulled up to the office and helped the woman and her daughter dismount. Thank you, she said. Her voice was still guarded, but the edges had softened slightly. Marcus nodded. He should have left then. Should have gotten back on his motorcycle and continued his journey home. But something kept him rooted to the spot. When was the last time you ate? The woman did not answer, which was answer enough. There is a diner about a mile back, Marcus said. Rosie's. Best meatloaf in 3 counties. Why don't you let me buy you and your daughter some dinner? You have already done enough. I have done what any decent person would do. Now I am offering to do a little more. The little girl tugged at her mother's hand. Mommy, I am hungry. And just like that, the decision was made. Rosie's diner was warm and bright, a welcome contrast to the gray world outside. The booths were red vinyl, worn smooth by decades of customers, and the air smelled of coffee and bacon and something sweet baking in the back. A handful of locals occupied the counter stools, their conversation falling to a murmur as Marcus entered with the woman and child. He was used to the looks. The leather jacket, the patches, the road-worn boots. People saw what they expected to see. But Rosie herself, a heavy-set woman with silver hair and kind eyes, knew better. Marcus Cole, she said, coming around the counter. Where have you been hiding yourself? Charity ride, he said. Just heading home. Rosie's eyes moved to the woman and child. And who are your friends? This is... Marcus realized he did not know their names. Elena, the woman said quietly. And this is my daughter, Sophie. Well, Elena and Sophie, Rosie said, her voice immediately softening. You look like you could use some of my famous hot chocolate. Extra marshmallows? Sophie's eyes widened. She looked up at her mother for permission, and when Elena nodded, a small smile appeared on the child's face. It was the first smile Marcus had seen from either of them. They settled into a booth near the back, away from curious eyes. Marcus ordered the meatloaf, Elena asked for soup, and Sophie got a grilled cheese with the crusts cut off. For a while they ate in silence, the only sounds the clink of silverware and the distant murmur of the other customers. It was Sophie who broke the silence. Are you a real motorcycle man? Marcus smiled. I suppose I am. My daddy had a motorcycle. But he sold it. Sophie. Elena's voice carried a warning. It is okay, Marcus said. He looked at the little girl with her rabbit clutched tightly against her chest. I have been riding motorcycles since I was not much older than you. Well, not riding exactly. Sitting on the back of my grandfather's bike while he took me around the block. Was your grandfather a motorcycle man too? He was, and his father before him. It runs in the family. Sophie considered this. My daddy said motorcycle men are dangerous. Marcus nodded slowly. Some are. Just like some people in cars are dangerous, and some people who walk are dangerous. It is not the motorcycle that matters. It is the person riding it. Elena had stopped eating. She was watching Marcus with an expression he could not quite read. Where are you folks headed? He asked. The question hung in the air between them. Away, Elena finally said. Just away. Marcus understood that too. Sometimes the destination did not matter. Sometimes all that mattered was putting distance between yourself and whatever you were running from. He did not push. Instead, he signaled Rosie for the check and paid for all 3 meals over Elena's protests. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, and the sky was beginning to clear, revealing the first stars of the evening. The motel is just up the road, Marcus said. You should be able to walk it in about 10 minutes. Elena nodded. Thank you. For everything. He should have let her go, should have said goodnight and continued on his way. But something in her voice made him stop. Elena. She turned. I am going to give you my number, he said. He pulled a card from his wallet, the one with the Iron Guardians logo and his cell phone number. If you ever need anything, you call. Day or night. She took the card, looked at it for a long moment, then slipped it into her pocket. Why? She asked. Why would you do this for a stranger? Marcus thought about the question. Because someone did it for me once, when I needed it most. And because that is what we do. We take care of each other. Elena's eyes glistened in the parking lot lights. For a moment it seemed like she might say something more. But instead she simply took Sophie's hand and started walking toward the motel. Marcus watched them go until they disappeared into the darkness. Then he got on his motorcycle and rode home. 3 days passed. Marcus returned to his normal life, such as it was. He worked in the garage attached to the Iron Guardians clubhouse, fixing motorcycles and the occasional car for members of the community who could not afford the prices at the dealership in town. He attended the weekly club meetings, helped organize the next charity event, and spent his evenings on the porch of his small house, watching the sun set over the Tennessee hills. But he could not stop thinking about Elena and Sophie. There had been something in the woman's eyes, something more than ordinary fear. And the little girl's question, "Is the bad man coming?" echoed in his memory like a song he could not shake. On the 4th day, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but Marcus answered anyway. Hello? For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a voice he recognized. Marcus, it is Elena. He sat up straighter. Is everything okay? Another pause. Longer this time. I need help, she said. And then, so quietly, he almost missed it. I did not know who else to call. Where are you? Still at the motel. Room 14. Stay there. I am on my way. He was out the door before she could respond. The ride to Pine Ridge took 15 minutes. Normally, Marcus respected the speed limits, understanding that his appearance on a motorcycle already made some people nervous. But tonight, he pushed the engine harder than usual, taking the curves with a precision born of decades of experience. When he pulled into the motel parking lot, Elena was waiting outside room 14. Sophie was nowhere in sight. She is inside, Elena said, reading his thoughts. Sleeping. Marcus dismounted and removed his helmet. Elena's face was pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes that had not been there 3 days ago. She looked like someone who had not slept since he had last seen her. What happened? Elena wrapped her arms around herself. He found us. The bad man? Marcus asked, using Sophie's words. Elena's face crumbled. My husband, Richard. She stopped, collected herself, started again. I left him 6 months ago. Took Sophie and ran. He is not safe to be around. Marcus nodded slowly. Go on. I have been moving from place to place trying to stay ahead of him, working odd jobs when I can, staying in motels, shelters when there is room. But he keeps finding us. It is like he knows where we are before we even get there. Does he have contacts? Friends who might be helping him? Elena shook her head. I do not know. Maybe. He was always good at getting people to do what he wanted. Charming, you know? The kind of person everyone likes at first. It took me years to see what was underneath. Marcus recognized the pattern. He had seen it before, in the stories of women who came to the Iron Guardians seeking help, in the desperate pleas that arrived at the clubhouse from across the country. Men who presented one face to the world and another to their families. Men who believed that their wives and children were possessions to be controlled rather than people to be loved. How do you know he found you? Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I found this under the door this morning. She handed it to Marcus. He unfolded it carefully. The message was short, written in a neat, precise hand. I know where you are. You cannot run forever. Marcus felt the cold anger that had served him well in combat begin to stir in his chest. But he kept his voice calm. Have you called the police? Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. I have called them before. Many times. He talks to them, explains that I am unstable, that I took his daughter without permission. He has a lawyer, Marcus, a good one. And I have nothing. No money, no proof, nothing except my word against his. And the courts believed him. The courts said there was not enough evidence. Said I needed to work things out with him for Sophie's sake. She pressed her hands against her face. I cannot go back to him. I cannot let Sophie grow up in that house. But I do not know what else to do. Every time I think I am safe, he appears again. It is like he will never stop. Marcus looked at the note in his hand. Then he looked at Elena, at the fear and exhaustion written across her features. Come with me, he said. What? There is a place where you can stay. Somewhere he will not find you. Somewhere you and Sophie can be safe while we figure this out. Elena stared at him. Why are you helping us? You do not even know me. Marcus thought about the question. He thought about his years in the military, about the oath he had sworn to protect and defend. He thought about his daughter, now grown, and the fierce protective love he still felt for her. He thought about all the people who had helped him when he was at his lowest, when he came home from the war with more scars on the inside than on the outside. Because it is the right thing to do, he said simply, and because no one should have to face something like this alone. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. Okay, she said. I will come with you. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. If you appreciate stories about ordinary people finding the courage to help strangers, stories that remind us that goodness still exists in this world, then you need to be part of this community. Hit that subscribe button now so you never miss a moment. The Iron Guardians Clubhouse was located on the outskirts of Millbrook at the end of a long dirt road that wound through acres of forest land. The main building was a converted barn, weathered but sturdy, with a workshop on one side and a large common room on the other. Behind it, scattered among the trees, were several small cabins used by members who needed a place to stay. Marcus brought Elena and Sophie to the clubhouse just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Several motorcycles were parked outside, their chrome catching the fading light. Is this where the motorcycle men live? Sophie asked, her voice a mixture of fear and fascination. Some of them, Marcus said. The ones who need a home. He led them inside. The common room was larger than it appeared from outside, with exposed wooden beams and a stone fireplace that dominated one wall. A long table ran down the center, surrounded by mismatched chairs, and the walls were covered with photographs, patches, and memorabilia from decades of rides and charity events. Several men looked up as they entered. They ranged in age from their late 20s to their early 60s, but they all shared the same look: weathered faces, calloused hands, and eyes that had seen more than most. "Brothers," Marcus said, "this is Elena and her daughter Sophie. They need our help." The oldest man in the room stood up. He was perhaps 70, with a long gray beard and arms covered in faded tattoos. His name was Harrison, but everyone called him Hawk, and he had been the president of the Iron Guardians for nearly 20 years. "What kind of help?" Hawk asked. Marcus explained the situation in brief, efficient sentences: the abusive husband, the failed attempts to find safety, the note under the motel room door. When he finished, Hawk nodded slowly. He turned to Elena. "Ma'am," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, "in this club, we have one rule that matters above all others. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. You and your daughter are safe here. You have my word on that." Elena's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle a sob. Sophie, sensing her mother's distress, wrapped her small arms around Elena's leg. "Thank you," Elena whispered. "Thank you." Hawk turned to one of the younger members. "Dustin, prepare the guest cabin. Make sure it has everything they need." Dustin, a lanky man with a shaved head and a kind smile, nodded and headed out the back door. Another member, a woman named Sarah who served as the club's unofficial den mother, approached Elena. "Come on, honey," she said. "Let's get you and your little one settled." "When was the last time you had a proper night's sleep?" "I cannot remember," Elena admitted. Sarah put an arm around her shoulders. "Well, that is about to change." As Sarah led Elena and Sophie toward the back of the clubhouse, Hawk motioned for Marcus to follow him outside. They stood on the porch, looking out at the darkening forest. "Tell me more," Hawk said. Marcus handed him the note. Hawk studied it for a long moment, then folded it and slipped it into his pocket. "We need to find out who this man is," Hawk said, "where he is, what resources he has." I was thinking the same thing. Hawk nodded. "I will make some calls. We have brothers in law enforcement, in the courts, in places that can get us information. If this man is as dangerous as she says, we need to know what we are dealing with." Marcus looked out at the trees. There was a time, not so long ago, when he would have wanted to find Richard himself, when the anger burning in his chest would have demanded immediate action. But the years had taught him patience, had taught him that the best way to protect the innocent was not always the fastest way. "What about Elena?" he asked. "Do we know she is telling the truth?" Hawk sighed. "Do you believe her?" Marcus thought about the fear in her eyes, about the way Sophie had asked if the bad man was coming, about the exhaustion and desperation that no one could fake. "Yes," he said. "I do." "Then that is enough for now. But we will still do our due diligence. We owe it to everyone involved to know the full story." They stood in silence for a while, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "You did good, brother," Hawk finally said, "bringing them here. I did what anyone would do." Hawk shook his head. "No, you did what you would do, and that is why this club is lucky to have you." He clapped Marcus on the shoulder and went back inside, leaving Marcus alone with the night. The next morning, Marcus woke early and walked to the guest cabin to check on Elena and Sophie. Smoke was already rising from the chimney, and through the window he could see movement inside. He knocked gently. Elena opened the door. She looked better than she had the night before. Still tired, still worn, but there was a light in her eyes that had not been there before. The light of someone who had finally found a moment of peace. "Good morning," she said. "Would you like some coffee?" Marcus stepped inside. The cabin was small but comfortable, with a main room that served as both living area and kitchen, a bedroom in the back, and a tiny bathroom off to one side. Sophie was sitting at the small table, eating cereal and watching her mother with the careful attention of a child who had learned to read adult moods for survival. "How did you sleep?" Marcus asked. Better than I have in months, Elena admitted. Sophie slept through the entire night. That has not happened since we left. Marcus sat down across from Sophie. Good morning, young lady. Sophie regarded him solemnly. Are you going to help my mommy? That is the plan. Sophie nodded, as if this confirmed something she had already suspected. Good. My mommy needs help. She never asks for it, but she needs it. Elena's face flushed. Sophie. It is okay, Marcus said. Your daughter is right. Everyone needs help sometimes. There is no shame in that. He turned to Elena. I want you to tell me everything. From the beginning. The more I know, the better we can protect you. Elena poured him a cup of coffee and sat down. For a long moment she was silent, gathering her thoughts. Then she began to speak. I met Richard when I was 23. He was older, successful. Everything I thought I wanted. He owned a chain of car dealerships across the Midwest, and he seemed so confident, so sure of himself. My family was not wealthy, and I was working 2 jobs just to pay rent. Richard offered me a different life. She paused, wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. The first year was wonderful. He was attentive, generous, romantic. He took me to Paris for our honeymoon, bought me a beautiful house, introduced me to his friends, his business partners. I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. What changed? Everything. And nothing. It happened so slowly I did not even realize it at first. He started criticizing little things. The way I dressed, the way I talked, the way I kept the house. Then he began isolating me from my friends, my family. Said they were bad influences. Said I did not need anyone but him. By the time Sophie was born, I had no one left. No friends, no family, no job, no money of my own. Everything was in his name. I was completely dependent on him. Marcus listened without interrupting. He had heard stories like this before. The gradual erosion of independence. The slow dismantling of a person's sense of self. It was a pattern as old as time, and it always ended the same way, with someone trapped in a prison that had no visible bars. When did you decide to leave? Elena glanced at Sophie, who was focused on her cereal. When she started having nightmares, Elena said quietly. When she started flinching whenever her father raised his voice. When I saw her watching us, learning that this was normal, that this was how families worked. I knew I had to get her out before she grew up thinking this was all she deserved. And Richard? He did not take it well. Said I was his wife, Sophie was his daughter, and no one was going to take what belonged to him. When I filed for divorce, he hired the most expensive lawyers in the state. Made it clear that if I tried to leave, he would destroy me. But you left anyway. I had to. For Sophie. Marcus nodded. He looked at the little girl, who had finished her cereal and was now drawing on a piece of paper with crayons someone had left in the cabin. Where is Richard now? That is the thing, Elena said. I do not know. After I left, I moved around constantly, new town every few weeks, different names at different motels. I thought I was being careful, but somehow he keeps finding me. She looked at Marcus with desperation in her eyes. It is like he has eyes everywhere. No matter where I go, no matter how careful I am, he always shows up. Marcus considered this. Does he have connections in law enforcement? I do not know. Maybe. He knows a lot of people. Politicians, judges, police chiefs. He donates to campaigns, sponsors charity events. Everyone in town thinks he is a wonderful man. Classic, Marcus thought. Hide the monster behind a mask of generosity. What about technology? He asked. Does he have access to your phone? Your email? Elena shook her head. I got rid of everything when I left. New phone, new email, paid for everything in cash. I even stopped using my real name. What name did you use? Elena hesitated. Sarah Williams. Marcus made a mental note. And Sophie? I called her Emma. Okay. Marcus stood up. I need to make some calls. You stay here, keep the doors locked, and do not go anywhere without letting someone know. If you need anything, Sarah is in the main building. Elena nodded. Marcus, she said as he reached the door. He turned. Why are you doing all this? And do not just say because it is the right thing. I need to understand. Marcus was silent for a moment. Then he said, When I came back from overseas, I was in a bad place. Could not sleep, could not work, could not see a future worth living for. I thought about ending it more than once. But then I found this club, these brothers. They gave me a purpose, a reason to keep going. They saved my life. He looked at her steadily. Everyone deserves a chance to be saved, Elena. Everyone deserves someone who will stand beside them when the world turns dark. Today, that someone is us. He left before she could respond. The next few days were a blur of activity. Hawk activated the club's network, reaching out to brothers across the country who worked in law enforcement, private investigation, and legal services. Information began to trickle in piece by piece, forming a picture of Richard that confirmed everything Elena had told them. Richard Caldwell, age 48, owner of Caldwell Automotive Group, with dealerships in 6 states. Net worth estimated at over $40 million. Married to Elena Caldwell for 7 years, divorced 4 months ago after she fled with their daughter. Public image, philanthropist, community leader, devoted father. Private reality, a controlling, manipulative man with a history of aggressive behavior that had been carefully covered up by expensive lawyers and well-placed donations. The brothers discovered that Richard had hired a private investigator to track Elena's movements. They found evidence that he had used his connections to access hotel records, credit card transactions, even traffic camera footage. He had turned finding his wife and daughter into a full-time obsession, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in the pursuit. He is not going to stop, Hawk said during a meeting of the club's senior members. He has the resources and the motivation to keep hunting them indefinitely. Then we need to make him stop, Marcus said. How? Marcus had been thinking about this for days. The old way would be to confront Richard directly, to show him that Elena had protectors now and that any attempt to harm her would be met with overwhelming force. But that approach had risks. Richard had lawyers, connections, and the willingness to use them. A direct confrontation could be spun as intimidation, could result in legal trouble for the club. There had to be another way. What if we exposed him? Marcus suggested. What if we showed the world who he really is? Hawk raised an eyebrow. Go on. Richard's power comes from his reputation. Everyone thinks he is this wonderful family man, this generous philanthropist. But if people saw the truth, if they saw the way he really treated his family, that power would evaporate. You are talking about going public. I am talking about giving Elena a platform, letting her tell her story, with evidence to back it up. Richard has spent years building his image. Let's tear it down. The room was silent as the brothers considered this. It is risky, Hawk said finally. If it backfires, if Richard's lawyers can make it look like defamation, Elena could end up worse off than before. Marcus nodded. I know. That is why we need to do it right. We need documentation, witnesses, irrefutable proof. And we need to make sure that when Elena tells her story, she is protected, legally and physically. Hawk stroked his beard. I know a reporter, he said slowly. Works for one of the national networks, specializes in investigative pieces. She has taken down bigger fish than Richard Caldwell. Can we trust her? I saved her brother's life in Vietnam, Hawk said. She owes me. Then let's make the call. While the club worked on the larger plan, Marcus focused on Elena and Sophie. He visited them every day, sometimes just to check in, sometimes to share a meal, sometimes to play with Sophie in the clearing behind the cabin. He learned that Elena had been a teacher before she married Richard, that she had dreamed of opening her own school someday, a place where children who struggled in traditional classrooms could find support and encouragement. Richard had dismissed those dreams as impractical, had insisted that her place was at home, managing the household while he built his empire. "You could still do it," Marcus told her one evening as they sat on the cabin's small porch, watching Sophie chase fireflies. "When this is over, you could go back to teaching, open that school." Elena smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Maybe. But first I have to survive this. First I have to make sure Sophie is safe." "She will be. We are going to make sure of that." Elena turned to look at him. "There is something I need to tell you," she said. Marcus waited. "When I first saw you at that gas station, I was terrified. A man on a motorcycle, leather jacket, all those patches. You looked like everything Richard had warned me about. Everything dangerous. And now? Now I realize I had it backwards. Richard wore suits and smiled for cameras, and everyone thought he was wonderful. You wear leather and people cross the street to avoid you. But you are the good one. He was the monster." Marcus did not know what to say, so he said nothing. They sat in comfortable silence as the fireflies danced, and Sophie's laughter echoed through the trees. If you are feeling moved by this story, if you believe that everyone deserves a chance to escape their past and build a better future, then I want you to leave a comment right now. Write these words: "Second chances matter." Let me know that you are here, that you are watching, that you believe in the power of people helping people. Days turned into weeks. Elena and Sophie settled into a routine at the clubhouse, becoming part of the extended family that gathered there. Sophie made friends with the children of other club members, running and playing with a freedom she had never known before. Elena began helping Sarah with the cooking and cleaning, grateful for the opportunity to contribute. But always, beneath the surface, there was the awareness that this was temporary, that somewhere out there, Richard was still looking, that the danger had not passed, only paused. The reporter's name was Diana Chen. She was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a reputation for fearless journalism. She had broken stories about corrupt politicians, criminal organizations, and corporate malfeasance. And she was very interested in Richard Caldwell. She arrived at the clubhouse on a Thursday afternoon, accompanied by a cameraman and a producer. Elena met with her in the main building, with Marcus and Hawk standing nearby for support. "Tell me everything," Diana said. "From the beginning. Do not leave anything out." Elena talked for 3 hours. She described the early days of her marriage, the gradual escalation of control, the isolation from everyone she loved. She talked about the fear that had become her constant companion, the way she learned to walk on eggshells around Richard, never knowing what might set him off. She talked about the night she decided to leave, about gathering Sophie in the middle of the night, taking only what she could carry, and slipping out the back door while Richard slept. About the months of running, the constant looking over her shoulder, the crushing weight of knowing that he would never stop searching. And she talked about the Iron Guardians, about Marcus and the coffee and the ride through the rain, about finding, for the first time in years, a place where she felt safe. When she finished, Diana was silent for a long moment. "This is powerful," she finally said. "But I need to be honest with you. Richard is going to fight back. He is going to deny everything, call you unstable, bring out his expensive lawyers. If we are going to take him down, we need more than your word." "What kind of more?" "Documentation, records, witnesses. Anything that corroborates what you have told me." Elena looked down at her hands. "There is something," she said quietly. "Something I have not told anyone." "What is it?" Elena took a deep breath. "Before I left, I found something in Richard's office. A safe hidden behind a painting. I managed to get it open. What was inside? Evidence of things Richard had done. Business deals that were not exactly legal, payments to people who should not have been receiving them, and records of other women. Women who had worked for him, who had complained about his behavior, who had been silenced with money or threats. Elena looked up, her eyes steady. I copied everything, put it on a flash drive. I have been carrying it with me ever since, waiting for the right moment. The room was silent. Do you have it now? Diana asked. Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. Diana took it carefully, as if it were made of glass. If what you say is true, she said, this changes everything. It is true, Elena said. All of it. Diana nodded slowly. Then let's get to work. The investigation took another month. Diana and her team went through the files on the flash drive, verifying each piece of information, tracking down witnesses, building a case that was airtight. They found the women Richard had silenced, women who were now willing to speak on camera about what he had done. They found records of illegal business dealings, evidence of corruption, proof of a pattern of behavior that spanned decades. And through it all, Elena waited at the clubhouse, watching Sophie grow stronger and more confident with each passing day. Watching her daughter learn to trust again, to laugh again, to believe that the world could be a safe place. One evening, Marcus found Elena sitting alone on the porch of the guest cabin. The sun had set, and the first stars were appearing in the deep blue sky. You okay? He asked, settling into the chair beside her. I have been thinking, Elena said, about everything that has happened. About the person I was when I married Richard, and the person I am now. What do you think? I think I was lost, Elena said slowly. I thought love meant giving up everything for someone else. I thought being a good wife meant disappearing into my husband's life, becoming whatever he wanted me to be. I did not know who I was outside of him. And now I am starting to remember, or maybe discovering for the first time. I am stronger than I thought. More resilient, more capable of surviving than I ever imagined. Marcus nodded. That is what adversity does. It shows us who we really are. Elena turned to look at him. There is something else I need to tell you. Marcus waited. The secret I have been carrying. The reason I have been so afraid. It is not just about Richard. It is about Sophie. What about her? Elena was silent for a long moment. Then she said, Sophie is not Richard's biological daughter. Marcus absorbed this. Go on. Before I met Richard, I was in another relationship. A man named David. He was kind, gentle, everything Richard pretended to be. We were going to get married, but he died in a car accident before we could. I am sorry. When I met Richard, I was still grieving, still lost. He seemed like a lifeline, someone who could take care of me. When I got pregnant, I assumed the baby was his. We had been together for a few months when I found out, but years later when Sophie was 3, I discovered the truth. A medical test, something routine. The blood types did not match. Sophie could not be Richard's child. Marcus felt the weight of this revelation settle over him. Does Richard know? Elena nodded, her eyes glistening. That is when everything changed. When he found out, something broke in him. He became obsessed with control, with making sure I could never leave, never tell anyone. He said if I ever tried to go, he would take Sophie from me, would prove I had deceived him, that I was unfit to be a mother. He said no court would side with a woman who had lied about her child's paternity. And you believed him? I had no choice. He had the money, the lawyers, the connections. I had nothing. So I stayed. For 4 more years I stayed, because I was terrified of losing my daughter. Marcus understood now. The depth of Elena's fear, the desperation that had driven her to run with nothing but the clothes on her back. She had not just been fleeing an abusive husband. She had been fleeing a man who held her daughter's future as a weapon. Elena, he said gently, that changes things. But it does not change the most important thing. What is that? You are Sophie's mother. You raised her, loved her, protected her. Biology does not determine family. Love does. Elena's tears finally spilled over. That is what I keep telling myself. But Richard does not see it that way. To him, Sophie is just another thing I stole from him. Another reason to hunt me down. Marcus reached over and took her hand. "Listen to me," he said. "Richard Caldwell is about to have much bigger problems than you. Diana's story is almost ready. When it airs, the whole world is going to see who he really is. His reputation, his business, his connections, all of it is going to crumble. And when that happens, he is not going to have the power to threaten anyone anymore." Elena looked at him with something that might have been hope. "You really believe that?" "I know it," Marcus said, "and I need you to believe it too. Because the hardest part is almost over. You just have to hold on a little longer." The broadcast was scheduled for a Sunday evening, prime time on one of the major networks. Diana had titled the piece, "Behind the Smile, The Hidden Life of Richard Caldwell." It would be a full hour, featuring interviews with Elena, with the women Richard had silenced, with former employees and business partners who had witnessed his true nature. The day before the broadcast, the Iron Guardians gathered at the clubhouse. Every member who could make it was there, nearly 50 men and women who had ridden from across the region to show their support. They filled the common room, spilling out onto the porch, their motorcycles lined up in rows that stretched across the property. Hawk called the meeting to order. "Tomorrow," he said, "the world is going to learn the truth about Richard Caldwell, and when that happens, there is a chance he might try something desperate. We need to be ready." He looked around the room at the assembled brothers and sisters. "Elena and Sophie are under our protection. That means we do not leave them alone. We do not let our guard down. We do not assume the danger is over until we know for certain that it is." Heads nodded throughout the room. "Marcus," Hawk continued, "you are on point. Whatever you need, whoever you need, you have it." Marcus stood. "I appreciate that, brother, and I want to thank all of you for being here. I know some of you rode for hours to get here. I know you have families, jobs, responsibilities, but you came anyway, because that is what we do. We show up for each other." He paused, looking around at the faces of his brothers and sisters. "Elena came to us with nothing but her daughter and her courage. She had been running for months, hunted by a man who had every advantage: money, power, connections. By every measure, she should have lost. But she did not lose, because she found us, and we do not abandon our own." The room erupted in a chorus of agreement. "Tomorrow," Marcus continued, "the truth comes out. And after that, Elena and Sophie will finally be free. But tonight, we stand watch. We keep them safe. We show them what it means to have a family that will never let them down." The broadcast aired at 8 o'clock on Sunday evening. The Iron Guardians gathered in the common room to watch, Elena and Sophie seated in the place of honor near the front. The room was silent as Diana's face appeared on the screen, her voice calm and measured as she began to lay out the evidence. "For years, Richard Caldwell has been known as a pillar of his community," Diana said. "A successful businessman, a generous philanthropist, a devoted family man. But tonight, we reveal a different story. A story of control, intimidation, and the systematic silencing of anyone who dared to speak out." The next hour was devastating. Diana presented the documents Elena had taken from Richard's safe, showing business deals that bordered on fraud and payments to individuals who should never have received them. She interviewed the women Richard had targeted over the years, their faces sometimes obscured, but their voices clear and strong. She spoke with former employees who described a workplace ruled by fear, and she told Elena's story: the isolation, the control, the years of walking on eggshells, the desperate flight with nothing but her daughter and her courage, the months of running, of hiding, of never feeling safe. By the time the broadcast ended, Elena was crying, but they were not tears of fear. They were tears of relief, of validation, of finally being believed. Marcus put his hand on her shoulder. "It is over," he said. "You did it. We did it." Elena corrected. All of us. Sophie, who had been watching with wide eyes, tugged at her mother's sleeve. Mommy, does this mean the bad man cannot find us anymore? Elena knelt down and took her daughter's face in her hands. That is exactly what it means, baby. The bad man is never going to hurt us again. The aftermath of the broadcast was swift and decisive. Within 24 hours, Richard Caldwell's business partners had begun distancing themselves from him. Within 48 hours, 3 separate investigations had been launched into his business practices. Within a week, his lawyers had abandoned him, unwilling to be associated with a case they could not win. And within a month, Richard Caldwell had been arrested on charges of fraud, tax evasion, and obstruction of justice. The custody battle that Elena had feared never materialized. Richard's lawyers had advised him that, given the public exposure of his behavior, any attempt to claim custody would only make things worse. He agreed to give up all parental rights in exchange for a reduced sentence. Sophie was, legally and completely, Elena's daughter. The day the final papers were signed, Marcus drove Elena and Sophie to the courthouse. They emerged an hour later, Elena clutching the documents that confirmed what she had always known in her heart. Sophie was hers, now and forever. We should celebrate, Marcus said. Elena smiled, a real smile, the kind that transformed her entire face. I know just the place, she said. They went to Rosie's Diner. It was the same booth where they had sat that first night, when Elena and Sophie were just strangers in the rain. Rosie brought them hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, and meatloaf that was just as good as Marcus remembered. So what happens now? Elena asked. Marcus shrugged. That is up to you. You can stay at the clubhouse as long as you want. Or, if you are ready, you can start building a new life somewhere else. The choice is yours. Elena was quiet for a moment, watching Sophie draw on a napkin with the crayons Rosie had provided. I have been thinking about that school, she said slowly. The one I always dreamed of opening. Yeah? There is a building for sale in town, an old church that has been empty for years. It would need a lot of work, but it has good bones, and it is the right size for what I have in mind. Marcus smiled. I know a few people who are pretty handy with tools. I am sure they would be willing to help. Elena looked at him. Why? Why have you done all this for us? Marcus considered the question. He thought about the wars he had fought, the brothers he had lost, the long years of searching for meaning in a world that often seemed devoid of it. Because everyone deserves a second chance, he said, and because sometimes helping someone else is the only way to save yourself. Elena reached across the table and took his hand. Thank you, she said, for everything. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. You would have done the same, he said. If our positions were reversed, that is the kind of person you are. Elena shook her head. A year ago, I am not sure I would have. A year ago, I was so broken I could barely see past my own fear. But now, because of you and your brothers, I remember what it means to have hope, what it means to believe that good people still exist. Sophie looked up from her drawing. Mr. Marcus? Yes, sweetheart? Are you going to be our friend forever? Marcus smiled. Forever is a long time, he said. But I am going to do my best. 6 months later, the Elena Caldwell School for Exceptional Learners opened its doors. The old church had been transformed into a bright, welcoming space filled with colorful artwork and comfortable furniture. The classrooms were designed for flexibility, able to accommodate different learning styles and needs. And the playground out back, built entirely by volunteers from the Iron Guardians, was the envy of every child in town. Sophie was the first student enrolled. On opening day, the Iron Guardians rode in formation to the school, their motorcycles creating a parade that brought the entire town out to watch. They parked in a long row along the street, their chrome gleaming in the morning sun. Elena stood on the front steps, Sophie at her side, and watched them approach. Hawk was the first to reach her. He removed his helmet and extended his hand. "Congratulations," he said. "You did something remarkable here." "I had a lot of help," Elena said. "That is how remarkable things get done," Hawk replied. "Nobody does it alone." One by one, the other brothers came forward to offer their congratulations. They brought gifts for the school, books and supplies and equipment. They brought food for the celebration that would follow. And they brought something else, something intangible but infinitely more valuable. They brought the knowledge that Elena and Sophie would never be alone again. Marcus was the last to approach. He stood before Elena, this woman who had stumbled into his life on a rainy night 6 months ago, and he marveled at the transformation. The fear that had haunted her eyes was gone, replaced by confidence and purpose. The hunched shoulders had straightened. The voice that had once trembled now rang clear and strong. "You did it," he said. "We did it," she corrected, just as she had on the night of the broadcast. Marcus smiled. "I guess we did." Sophie tugged at his leather jacket. "Mr. Marcus, can I show you my classroom? Lead the way, sweetheart." Sophie grabbed his hand and pulled him through the front doors, into the bright and hopeful space that Elena had created. And as Marcus looked around at the colorful walls and the eager young faces, he felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt like he was home. That evening, after the celebration had ended and the last of the guests had gone home, Marcus sat on the porch of the school with Elena. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air was filled with the sound of crickets and the distant rumble of motorcycles heading home. "I never thanked you properly," Elena said. "You have thanked me about 100 times. Not for helping me, for believing me. From the very first moment you believed me. Do you know how rare that is? How many people I approached before you who turned away, who did not want to get involved?" Marcus shook his head. "I did what anyone would do." "No," Elena said firmly. "You did what very few people would do. You saw a stranger in trouble and you stopped. You offered help when you had no obligation to help. You put yourself and your brothers at risk for someone you did not even know." She turned to face him. "That is not normal, Marcus. That is extraordinary, and I will never forget it." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When I was overseas, I saw a lot of things that made me question whether there was any good left in the world. I came home broken, convinced that humanity was beyond saving. But then I found the Iron Guardians, and they showed me that good people still exist, that courage and compassion are not extinct, that the darkness does not have to win." He looked at Elena. "You showed me the same thing. You could have given up 100 times. You could have surrendered to Richard, gone back to that life, accepted that there was no escape. But you did not. You kept fighting. You kept protecting your daughter. You kept believing that there was something better waiting for you, even when everything suggested otherwise. That took more courage than anything I have ever done," he continued. "So if anyone should be thanking anyone, it is me thanking you. For reminding me why I do what I do. For reminding me that hope is not just a word. It is a choice, one we make every single day." Elena's eyes glistened. She reached over and took his hand, and they sat together in comfortable silence as the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky. If you watched this far, it is because you felt something. This story touched your heart, reminded you that courage and compassion still exist, showed you that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. So I need you to do something for me. First, leave a comment below. Write these words: "I watched this far." Let me know that you are part of this community, that you believe in the power of people helping people. Second, if you have not already, hit that subscribe button. This channel is dedicated to stories like Elena's, stories of hope and resilience, and the unbreakable bonds that form when we choose to stand together. Third, give this video a like. It helps more people find these stories, helps spread the message that goodness is not dead, that heroes still walk among us. And finally, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who might be going through their own dark time, who might need to be reminded that they are not alone. Because that is what the Iron Guardians taught Elena. That is what Elena taught Marcus. And that is what I hope this story taught you. No matter how dark the night, dawn always comes. No matter how alone you feel, there is always someone willing to stand beside you. No matter how hopeless things seem, there is always a reason to keep fighting. We take care of our own. And now, you are one of us.